We've been talking about homeostasis as one of the most important principles in physiology. The concept of homeostasis is the maintenance of a stable internal environment, or maintenance of an environment at a specific set point. If we're talking about body temperature, that'd be 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. For pH, plasma pH, that'd be 7.4, and so on. We have specific set points that have to be maintained. In order to maintain a set point, the implication is that anytime there's a deviation from the set point, there's some process that will help us return to that specific set point. In this initial example, I started with a movement to the left that had to be countered with a movement to the right. That might not make tangible sense, but we know if blood pH increases, then it's got to decrease. If body temperature increases, it has to decrease. So it doesn't matter what the movement is, what the deviation is. If there's some movement away from a set point, that movement has to be countered by a movement in the opposite direction. This process that maintains homeostasis or maintains the environment at a set point is called negative feedback. Negative feedback because the response is the opposite from the initial change. So if we start at homeostasis, we know that any change has to be countered by the opposite change. How does this process work? The process requires a sensor, control center, and an effector. Probably the most common analogy we draw here is a thermostat that maintains room temperature. So we have a sensor, a thermometer, that measures temperature. The thermometer on its own doesn't do anything, it just responds to a change in temperature. The control center interprets a change, and the effector is either a heater or air conditioner that will counter the initial change. Let's have a look at me trying to be a thermostat. Okay, so today I'm going to try to be a thermostat. I've got a thermometer on this fork here. I don't know if you can see 74 degrees there. I've got some cold water. I got a bunch of snow from outside and then filled it with water. So when I look at it here, this comes to, I'm reading 32.7, we're at 32.5 degrees, so that's not bad about while it's warming up. And then I've got some hot water where the thermometer is reading about 195 degrees. Okay, so my goal is going to be to keep this glass of water at 100 degrees. I'm going to look right now. When I measure the temperature, it's 102, 101, 100. Wow, I didn't realize I was that close. Okay, dropping down to 98, 97 degrees, somewhere in there. So it's 97.1. This is Fahrenheit. I'm going to try then to look what happens when I heat this up. Drop this glass into the hot water. We know what's going to happen. Water is going to start getting warmer. So looking now at the thermometer, this water is heated up to about 104 degrees. I'm going to take the water, move it into colder water, and then if we wait long enough, we'll see that this water cools off. So when the temperature deviates from the set point, I will make sure that the temperature reverses that change by putting it either in hotter or colder water. The sensor is a thermometer. The sensor on its own doesn't do anything. The control center reads the thermometer and figures out what to do. But the control center, even knowing what to do, can't do something without an effector. In this case, we need not only skeletal muscles, but we need a mechanism for cooling or warming the water. So in order to maintain homeostasis, the critical component is the response to any change is the opposite of the original change. We have to move in that direction. If we didn't, If there were a different change, then we don't end up at the set point where we started, we end up somewhere else. So in order to maintain homeostasis, we require a negative feedback loop. In a negative feedback loop, any initial change is countered by the opposite change. This process is maintained through a sensor. The sensor is interpreted by a control center. The control center decides what needs to be done and sends a signal to an effector. The effector requires the tools to bring about that opposite change.